I wish you were mine. The words escaped her trembling lips, just as the black car sped through the rain-soaked streets of Boston, headlights slicing through the darkness like a warning of everything about to fall apart. David tightened his grip on the steering wheel, his heart pounding harder than the storm outside. He was just a single dad, a driver trying to make ends meet, not someone meant to be tangled in the life of a billionaire heiress. But tonight, everything changed. Nancy, the elegant yet fragile woman sitting in the back seat, wasn't just another passenger, was running from something or someone. Her voice shook as she whispered directions. Her usual composed aura shattered into pieces of fear when the car suddenly jerked as she gasped in pain. David realized this wasn't just panic, was having a severe allergic reaction. Without thinking, he pulled over, his instincts overriding fear. "Nancy, stay with me," he said, his voice firm but filled with a kindness he didn't even realize he carried. Her breathing grew shallow, her vision fading, and in that desperate moment, David remembered the emergency training he once learned while trying to qualify for a better job he never got. Time slowed. He gently held her face, trying to keep her conscious, but when she stopped responding, he did the only thing he could: kiss her, giving her the breath she was losing, pouring life back into her with a courage born from love for his own daughter. It wasn't romance, it was survival. But in that fleeting moment, something deeper passed between them. Minutes later, the ambulance lights painted the streets red and blue, but David stayed behind, watching as they took her away, unsure if he'd ever see her again. To him, she was just someone he helped, someone he had to save. But to Nancy, as she regained consciousness in the hospital, the memory of his voice, his touch, and the life-saving kiss lingered like something she couldn't forget. Days passed, and David returned to his normal life, waking up early, packing his daughter's lunch, hiding his exhaustion behind a tired smile. He never spoke about that night, never expected anything from it. Kindness, for him, wasn't a transaction, it was simply who he was. Meanwhile, Nancy, now fully recovered, Saturday in her luxurious penthouse, surrounded by wealth that suddenly felt empty. For the first time in her life, someone had saved her, not because of her status, but because she was human. Determined to find him, she used every resource at her disposal. But when she finally tracked him down, she didn't approach him as a billionaire heiress. Instead, she stood quietly near his modest apartment, watching as he laughed with his daughter, fixing her broken toy with gentle patience. That moment broke something inside her in the best way possible. When Nancy finally walked up to him, David frowned. He didn't expect to see her again, especially not here. She thanked him, her voice soft but filled with emotion, but David simply nodded, brushing it off like it was nothing extraordinary. That humility shook her even more. She offered him money, a reward, anything he wanted, but he refused. "I didn't save you for that," he said calmly. "I just did what anyone should do." But she knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would risk themselves like that. Not everyone would care without expecting something in return. That's when Nancy realized what she felt wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something real. And as she looked into his eyes, she whispered those same words again, this time not out of fear, but from her heart. "I wish you were mine." David tried to ignore the way those words echoed in his mind, convincing himself that someone like Nancy belonged to a world far beyond his reach. But Nancy wasn't willing to let the distance define them. Instead of pulling him into her world, she stepped into his, spending time with his daughter, helping her with schoolwork, laughing over simple dinners that felt more meaningful than any luxury she had ever known. Slowly, David began to see her not as a billionaire heiress, but as a woman who craved love, warmth, and a place where she truly belonged. And Nancy, in return, saw a man whose strength wasn't in wealth, but in his endless capacity for kindness and love. But their growing connection didn't go unnoticed. The media caught wind of Nancy's unusual visits, turning their story into headlines filled with judgment and speculation. Her family opposed it, her advisors warned her, and the world tried to pull them apart. For a moment, it seemed like reality would crush the fragile bond they had built. David, not wanting to become a burden in her life, made the painful decision to step back. He told her she deserved someone from her world, someone who wouldn't complicate her life. But Nancy refused to accept that. For the first time in her life, she chose her heart over her expectations. In a bold move that shocked everyone, Nancy publicly rejected the pressure of her status and declared that the man who saved her life was the man she chose to stand beside. She didn't just fight for him, she built a future with him. She invested in David's dreams, helping him start his own transport business, not as charity, but as belief in his potential. And David, in return, gave her something no amount of money could buy, a family filled with genuine love, laughter, and warmth. Months later, on a quiet evening, as the city lights shimmered in the distance, David stood beside Nancy on a balcony, not as her driver, but as her partner. His daughter ran toward them, laughing, wrapping them both in a hug that felt like home. And in that moment, everything made sense. The chaos, the fear, the impossible odds he had all led to this. David looked at Nancy, a soft smile on his face, and finally said the words he once thought he never could. Maybe, I was always yours. And this time, when Nancy smiled back, there was no fear, no uncertainty, only a love that had turned a single moment of kindness into a forever story.